World. It's November 13th, 2023. You are viewing and listening to Issues and Answers on the WCEG Talk Radio Network. I'm your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. Yes, we are a network, and our programming is available to you in a multiplicity of media platforms. We are the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. We just call ourselves WCEG for short. Our goal is not just to brighten your view of the world, but also to enlighten your perspective about our environment, our socio-political struggles, that bane of classism and racism that makes all of our lives more difficult than they should be, and our quest to make this world a bit better than it was before we arrived in it. Man, I'm going to talk about that later, so remember that. But may God bless us all as we try to knit the tapestry of humanity into a quilt of peace, brotherhood, and understanding. Now, WCEG has grown even larger than it was 6, 7, 8 months ago. Before, we were available on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, and we thought we were doing great. But we've moved up and moved on. We now have 2 websites, WCEGTalkRadio.com and WCEGRadio.com. We have 3 separate TV channels. They are WCEG Talk, WCEG TV, and WCEG Music Videos. We have 2 mobile apps, and all Apple devices and Android devices can access our program. If you have Alexis, just say, play WCEG Talk Radio in a voice just like that. And on your Roku streaming device, just type in WCEG Network. We continue to be available on the social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, called X now, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Now, Facebook users, and I encourage you to do this, may type in questions and comments. All of our programming can be viewed live on YouTube, and they are also archived on YouTube for future viewing. Just type in WCEG Talk Radio, wait for that to pop up, and then search for Issues and Answers, Norman A. Carter Jr. Podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, JioSaavn, which is India, and nearly every other podcast platform you can imagine. WCEG is available worldwide, and our programming on Issues and Answers will reflect that. Finally, the topics and opinions on Issues and Answers are solely those of your host and not my station, WCEG. So leave my boss alone, my show, my words, my comments. Enjoy. Send your accolades or non-accolades to me via WCEG. Well, today I don't have any guests. You're sort of going to be stuck with me for the next hour or so, as long as my voice can hold out. Just before the program, I recall, well, some of you know that I teach Bible study. And at the last installment of our Bible study, which we do by Zoom, at the end of the Bible study, one of the senior members of our group said that they were proud of the fact that I did so much research on our Bible study, and the fact that this person who has studied religion for longer than I have been alive, said that a lot of the things that I said during Bible study irritated her at times, but then when she went back and did the research and found out that many of the things that I was saying were true. And I believe in truth. Not that I am perfect. I strive to be that, but none of us ever reach that perfect state. But uh, I strive for that as much as I can, and I try to be as factual as much as I can. And I know that sometimes I irritate people, as I irritated this lady, when I say certain things. But my purpose is not to irritate, is to educate. And we move on. On a very rainy weekend, this past weekend, our country honored and remembered the veterans of our armed forces. Now, I grew up when there was a mandatory draft. Nearly every able bodied person was obligated to serve 2 years in the military. But thanks to activists such as Muhammad Ali, we no longer have a mandatory draft. Today, most of our millennials and Generation Zers have no idea what it's like to train, to kill, or be killed. Most have never had to repeat, I am an American fighting man. I serve the forces which guard my country and our way of life. I am prepared to give my life in their defense. How unfortunate. We veterans know that freedom is not free. We veterans know that there are fields, jungles, and oceans filled with the blood of American soldiers who believe the freedoms that we enjoy every day were worth fighting for. None chose to die, but all knew this was a real possibility. That is courage. This weekend, we saluted those courageous souls who died to keep us free, and those courageous souls who suffer silently with the plague of post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of combat, and all those who walk among us today who have served and who are serving these United States of America in our armed forces. We thank you. May God continue to bless you. Now, in October of this year, we featured on Issues and Answers Mrs. Sheila Mitchell Murphy and Mr. Calvin Murphy. Excuse me. They are parents of Specialist Etienne Murphy, who lost his life while serving our country in Syria in 2017. They are Gold Star parents. They organized a nationwide support group for Gold Star families. The website link is https colon /SPC Murphy Gold Star Parents Fund.org. That's https colon /SPC MURPHY GOLDSTARPARENTSFUND.org. Please check them out. Send a donation, give them your support. It's a great foundation for our veterans, particularly those families who have lost children or family members during combat. That's number one. And number two presentation. You know, February 2nd, 2023, this is from the Associated Press. A Biden administration task force designed to reunite children separated from their families during President Trump's presidency has reconnected nearly 700 children with their families, officials said Thursday. I'm reading this article. President Joe Biden issued an executive order on his first day in office to reunite families that were split up under the Trump administration's widely condemned practice of forcibly separating parents and children at the U.S.-Mexico border to discourage illegal immigration. That past Thursday marked February, which that would have been in January, marked the 2-year anniversary of the task force. According to figures released by the Department of Homeland Security, excuse me, 3,881 children were separated from their families from 2017 to 2021. Think about that. 3,881 children. About 74% of those have been reunited with their families. 2,176 before the task force was created, and 689 afterward. Think about this as we close out this year or approaching the close of 2023. Desperate people running from lawless countries ruled by murderous gangs, and we keep silent about thousands of children maliciously separated from their parents. This past week, Donald Trump has vowed to do the same again if he is reelected. Think about that. Let's move to health. It's time to get your vaccinations, folks. 2 weeks ago, I had my COVID, pneumonia, and flu shots. I still need to get my shingles and RSV shots, but I will do that in the next coming week. If you have not made an appointment to get vaccinated, please do. Don't be duped by those who have politicized getting vaccinated by giving false information about side effects or even laughing at people who did get vaccinated. Think about the thousands who believed the president who said it's a disease that will be gone by spring. Think about his fan club who ridiculed people taking vaccines. Think about nationally renowned Atlanta-based radio talk show host Herman Cain, who went to a crowded political rally in Colorado during the height of the COVID-19 epidemic and laughed at people who wore masks and took the advice of Dr. Fauci and avoided crowds. Herman Cain is dead from COVID-19. Think about his famous saying, which is, "We're not stupid." Really? The politicization of life-saving vaccines is horrible and typifies the malicious misdirection of millions of people, costing hundreds of thousands of lives. You know, I'm old enough to remember when the Salk and Sabin vaccines came out. And remember that prior to that, the plague of polio across this country and the world. And I remember because they did it by, I think, by neighborhoods or by alphabetical order, but hundreds of people, thousands of people in my neighborhood lined up at a health center to get their polio shots. Not questioning the government, no false narratives out about side effects from the vaccine, nobody telling you to take bleach. Maybe we can cure this with bleach. None of that nonsense. All of us happy to get that vaccine because most of us had already had vaccines for diphtheria and typhoid, typhus, so many other diseases that had plagued this country for generations and generations. And we were so happy to get that, to the point that now you very, very seldom hear about anyone in this country contacting polio. Very, very seldom. Where when I was a child, polio was running rampant. So folks, yes, you need to be smart, you need to be careful, but you need to trust medical experts when these vaccines come out, because you know something, you can make a mistake and not take it, but when you're dead, there's no coming back. So think about that. Now, on another topic, and please, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to, if you're on Facebook, please feel free to type them in about anything that we may talk about. I hope that I'm able to answer any concerns or questions that you may have. All right, let's talk about some politics and politricks. Now, thanks to lies told by Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and former attorney to the President of the United States, Fulton County's election office is under attack by domestic terrorists. It was not enough that the aforementioned scum buckets, and that's who they are, were responsible for the death threats to 2 election poll workers. This madness continues. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why elections matter. When you sit on your butts and engage in nonsense such as, they are the same, I don't believe in voting, or because of my religion, I don't vote. Trust me, I have heard these in the past few weeks. You create this dangerous situation where malevolent people take control of your government and use that position to threaten the lives of good people doing good work. Shame on all of you non-voters. As we close out this year and prepare ourselves for the national election in year 2024, think about the idiots we have in Congress and the Senate. Why is it that at the end of nearly every budget year, we go through this display of political ignorance and party loyalty that has no effect on our congressional and Senate leaders, but adversely affects millions of citizens and businesses? National budgets seem to be nothing more than an opportunity for political masturbation by impotent political leaders. Why do we accept this? Why can't 435 adults reach a consensus that is devoid of political stunts and one-upmanship? We cannot continue to vote for these inept leaders with the paralyzing inability to be critical thinkers. But as long as we are stuck on only looking at political party affiliations rather than character, integrity, and loyalty to the people who elected them, we will continue to be stuck in this putrid quicksand of legislative ineptitude. Political parties are currently constructed, are led by extremists. I'm not exaggerating. Think about that. These extremists only listen to their small but loud audiences. This includes both Democrats and Republicans. Stop being lazy non-thinkers. When you speak to people who demonize a political party just because, ignore them. They are part of the problem. If your allegiance is to a political party rather than the safety and security of your family, your community, and your country, you are little more than a political robot who can be depended upon to vote without thinking. This is just plain stupid. But it is what both major political parties depend upon. They don't want you to think. They just want you to vote. Now let's talk about voter apathy. because many people feel they have nothing to vote for. I found that recently when I spoke to a group of Latino citizens at a church in Snellville, Georgia. But it's also true of many regular American citizens. Some people are just never considered in the political discourse. Most poor or middle class voters cannot afford to attend political rallies. But you know what? Leaders must walk outside of their ethnic and political comfort zones if they are truly interested in serving the public. Let me give you a couple of live examples here. Uh, and I'll make this one point. One thing I have noticed in Metro Atlanta is that African American politicians only want to talk to African Americans and are afraid, yes, afraid to speak to anyone not of the same heritage. That includes whites, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, and any other ethnic group. Now, many whites have that same affliction. This leads to people erroneously thinking that they can only vote for people who share their same ethnicity. That is how you get that's how you get elected integrity challenged officials like William Campbell, Kasim Reed, Richard Nixon, Spiro Agnew, and Donald Trump. Again, we need to stop looking at political party and race as prerequisites for elective office. Character and energy matter. Intelligence and critical thinking matter. And they must be in the forefront of our thinking when we vote. If you are dumb enough to vote for a straight party ticket every time you vote without thinking, you are going to receive just what you deserve, nothing. And let me talk a little bit about political courage, because I find that extremely lacking, especially here in Metro Atlanta, because that's what I'm going to talk about. I have been, not my own election, I won't talk about that, but I've been involved in other elections. And I remember here on WCEG interviewing a person who was campaigning for a regional office. And he had great ideas that he was trying to get support for in his election campaign. And one of the things that I said to him was, have you spoken to poor whites or people in Appalachia? And his response was basically, he hadn't even thought about that. And I said to him, you know, there's strength in numbers. He didn't take my advice. He lost. I was part of another political campaign for a local politician. And I asked him, had he campaigned in a certain area that I won't name, because the constituency there is predominantly white, predominantly Republican. And he said no. He refused. I said, this would be good. I said, even if you pulled a few votes from that community, because you would, because he really had good programs. But again, I attribute that to fear, that you refuse to talk to people who don't look like you. And he lost. And that's just insane. I just don't understand that, where you're running for office, your promise is to represent all the people, but you refuse to talk to certain people because of their race, because of their economic level. You don't want to walk down in the hood and go on the get on the street corner and talk to people, or walk into a mom and pop grocery store in a particularly low income neighborhood and just engage people in conversation. You don't have time for that. Or as one politician of national prominence in this area, you refuse to come on WCEG for an interview because, oh yeah, well, WCEG is not big enough. How stupid, how dumb, how inconsiderate. And this is why there's voter apathy. When you don't take people into account, when you don't talk to people, talk with people, listen to people of every race, every economic level, you're a hypocrite. And of course, these people feel like they have nothing to vote for you for. So what happens? You don't get their vote, and then you're mad, and then you lose, and you have no one to blame but yourself. So I say this to politicians here in particularly metropolitan Atlanta. You need a new strategy, because your strategy isn't working when despite your ethnicity, you put a racial criteria on who you uh, uh, campaign to and who you choose to represent. You're bogus, absolutely bogus, and you just need to get out of the political arena. If that makes you feel sad, makes you feel bad, makes you mad, tough. It's the truth. Let's talk about another truth that's so much avoided in this particular region. It's pathetic. Remember the Atlanta public school cheating scandal? I know my boss here at WCEG probably tired of me hearing this, but I've been talking about this and beating this drum ever since I've been a broadcaster here on WCEG. It upsets me because it is a betrayal, a betrayal of public trust by every political entity in this area. And that includes the NAACP and any other activist association that talks about how much they're concerned about our children. But I found out last week that a lot of people still don't know about this or have totally forgotten about it. But you know what? We have a penchant for forgetting things that happen to African American children, don't we? They're not important. They're important to me, and they should be important to you. Now, I found it horrendous that as that during this cheating scandal, Atlanta cheating scandal, that as many educators were coming to trial, national and local leaders of sororities and fraternities were able to hold press conferences to support and ask that criminal charges to be dropped against their brothers and sisters. Put that in quotes. Not one of these leaders, nor any African American political leader, said one word about how the students, who are now young adults, were betrayed and denied the education that is mandated by state laws throughout this country. And let me just review this for you, because some details before I get a little further. Because this scandal occurred back in 2015, where an Atlanta jury convicted 11 teachers, 11, of racketeering and other crimes for cheating on student standardized tests. It's one of the many scandals reported in those years in most states and the District of Columbia. but the fallout still continues, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The key difference between what happened in Atlanta and the other cities is that prosecutors used a law ordinarily used to prosecute mobsters. It's called the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, also known as RICO. And it used that to go after those they deemed guilty. Now, a grand jury in 2013 indicted Beverly Hall. Beverly Hall, she's deceased now, but she was the superintendent who was accused of running a corrupt organization that used test scores to financially reward and punish teachers. 34 teachers, principals, and others were also charged. All but one of the charged was Black. Nearly all of the students were Black. Can I point that out? Did I point that out? Now, many of the teachers who were indicted pleaded guilty. 12 went to trial. One was acquitted of all charges, and the 11 others were convicted of racketeering and a variety of other charges. Now, as I said, on this program for the past 4 years, I have asked nearly every local politician. If you don't believe me, go back and pull out the archived remarks, especially every politician who's now in office in metropolitan Atlanta, especially those who talk about reparations. I asked, have they ever considered reparations for those children who were thrown out into the world underprepared to step into employment, which required a high school diploma? But you know what? We don't hold politicians, teachers, and leaders accountable when they do bad things to our children. That's why the behavior persists. We give them the African American get out of jail free card. That's what we do. Kids African American, the offenders Black African American, let's forgive them and forget. Let's let them go. Let's go on. Let's find something that white people did to us. We don't care what Black people do to us. Yeah, that's it. But you know what? You think it's over? You think it was over in 2015? Nope. Nope. It's not. Recently, I spoke with an educator who remarked that there are teachers today, who make excuses for high school and middle school children, particularly those of African American heritage. These teachers consider a child's home life, poverty level, and past racial inequities, and even the belief that these children lack the ability to learn as excuses for giving them passing grades they do not deserve. Think about that. This eliminates confronting angry parents who are more concerned about their personal pride than their child's education. Yeah, true. This eliminates confronting angry students who feel they have a right to curse out or assault any educator. True. This is a testament to what we are willing to accept despite the eventual future consequences. It has been referred to, and I want you to remember this, it has been referred to as the soft bigotry of low expectations. The soft bigotry of low expectations. Are you one of the neglectful parents who always blame the teacher while forgetting you are the primary educator of your family? Now, Someone whom I trust, admire, and respect sent me a video recently from Dr. Jawanza Konjufu. He is an educator, mentor, author, and lecturer. And there's a little snippet. You can find it on YouTube. And basically, it's entitled, What You Can Expect from Parents in High Achieving Homes. What you can expect from parents in high achieving homes. There are 5 things. Number 1, parents believe the world is going to be a better place. Parents believe the world is going to be a better place. They instill hope in their children. Hope. Parents are consistent with their children. That is, not changing the rules from day to day. Consistency. Parents are complementary to their children. Their households are not filled with 4-letter words or words of defeat. Parents are complementary to their children. Parents have high expectations for their children. I can remember my own children, and they will tell you that daddy was never satisfied with the C. If you came home with the C, you got a lecture. If you came home with a B and I knew that you should have had an A, you had a lecture. You can't be satisfied with just getting by. You must have high expectations for your children. If you give them excuses, they will use your excuses. Children are smart, sometimes smarter than their parents. And last but not least, parents must believe they are the primary educators of their children. Parents must believe they are the primary educators of their children. That means you take a role in the education of your children and you just don't throw them out there to school and send them to teachers. Nope. I know that things like counting, basic counting, that was standard stuff in my home from very, very little. Even in my own home, once my children learned their alphabet and and reading in the kindergarten, first grade, where they began to first develop their reading skills, I used to give my children assignments. They had to read a cartoon strip. We used to have a comic strips in a newspaper. Read a comic strip and be able to tell me what that comic strip is about. Now you had to do that 2 or 3 times a week. As they got older, it was read a news article and let's discuss the news article that you read. Not necessarily asking you to read the whole newspaper, which will come because you'll do that. Intellectual curiosity will cause you to do that. But you have to challenge. You have to have expectations for your children. You have to be willing to sit down and talk and spend time with your children. And stop beating up on teachers because you love to do that. And you know what? If your child gets a failing grade, that means that you, your child, and your educators have work to do. It doesn't mean going up and screaming and yelling at the teacher because your kid got a D or an E or is not going to be able to graduate. Sometimes that's a blessing. Stop thinking about your own personal pride and how you can't go back to your neighbors and say, yeah, my son graduated or my daughter graduated. Now, sometimes it's need for them to get educated well than just to graduate. We move on, and you are listening to WCEG Talk Radio, Issues and Answers, and my name is Norman A. Carter Jr. I remind you that the opinions expressed on this program are strictly my own. Let's talk about the Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome. Some of you know what that is, some of you don't, so let me explain to you what it is. The Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological disorder that occurs when the victim of a crime identifies with their captor and their agenda. Now, the name comes from an attempted bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden in 1973. And what happened was four bank employees were held hostage in a bank vault for 6 days. The victims eventually defended the hostage takers and refused to testify against them. Think about that. That's happened on airplanes that were hijacked back in the 70s and 80s also, where people began to sympathize and empathize with the hostage takers, with the terrorists. And it's a sickness, it's a psychological disorder. I want you to think about that. On October 7th, 2023, the terrorist group Hamas slaughtered 1,200 innocent and unarmed Israeli civilians. Now, once Israel began to retaliate and shoot back at the terrorists who was shooting missiles over into Israel, the world began to become infected by the Stockholm Syndrome. Now, let's talk about some facts. Firstly, Hamas is incorrectly painted as Palestinian freedom fighters. They are not. They are terrorists dedicated to the annihilation of all Jewish people and the destruction of Israel. If you think I'm lying, do your research. I'm not lying. They're no better than the Nazis of Nazi Germany. That's who they are. Now, these cowards, and that's who they are, use the Palestinian people as human shields. That is not a new tactic. The North Vietnamese used it during the Vietnam War. The domestic terrorist group MOVE, MOVE, in Philadelphia, used this tactic while terrorizing two different neighborhoods in different years. Now, because of the slaughter and of the missiles being fired over into Israel, Israel defended itself by shooting back. Israel made a determination that the best way to defend itself was to rid itself of the terrorist organization that was in control of Gaza, which borders Israel. Now, let's remember, because there are people out here now who are demonizing Israel, that prior to Israel invading Gaza, Israel did the humane thing. It told Palestinian people in Gaza that they were coming in to destroy Hamas. and Hamas's ability to kill people in Israel. This is what they were going to do. And basically, they gave people a week to move. Doesn't seem like a lot of time, but you know what? If you're running for your life, if you have the ability to run, I don't care whether you're walking, you're running, you're in your car, you're on a horse. When it comes to being dead, you're going to find a way to move. They told me that they were coming to bomb my neighborhood tomorrow. I'm not going to come up with some excuses. I'm going to do what I can to get out, to get my family out. But what happened, and this is underreported, is that Hamas forced many people to stay in the area that they knew the Israelis were going to be coming into. Because as all terrorist organizations know that we're like an overly compassionate people. We are. And so they knew that there would be civilian casualties if Israelis came in to get them. So while they hid themselves in tunnels, under hospitals, under residences, under apartment buildings, they forced the people who lived in those areas to stay there. On the other end, on the other border, the people who were trying to flee into Egypt were blocked by Egyptians who refused to let people flee into their country. Think about that. Think about that. We want to blame Israel. Let us not forget, this is current events, but some of you don't watch or pay attention to current events, that before October 7th, 2023, Israel and the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Palestinian leaders were in negotiations to recognize Gaza as a Palestinian state. Do I need to repeat that? Before October 7th, 2023, Israel, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Palestinian leaders were in negotiations to recognize Gaza as a Palestinian state. This means they likely would have had representation in the United Nations, the same as many independent countries. This is something that Hamas and their murderous cousins to the north, Hezbollah, did not want to happen. Neither of these two factions want harmony in the Middle East. Both are supported by the Iranian government, which now has been attacking our military, which is sitting on ships in the area as a deterrent, but not a combative force. Thousands here in America and the world are calling for a ceasefire. But all of these thousands are directing their calls for a ceasefire to Israel. All of these thousands are directing their calls for a ceasefire to Israel. Not one is asking for Hamas to cease fire. Not one. Now, let me tell you something, folks. If somebody is shooting at you and you have a gun, are you going to not shoot back at them? It's survival. But we expect Israel not to shoot back while they're being shot at. It's insane. Now, A big reason for this is the anti-Semitism, that has plagued the Yehudim. That's who they were originally called. Today we get lazy, we call them Jewish. But this is the anti-Semitism that has plagued them for centuries through pogroms, inquisitions, and the Holocaust of the 1930s and 1940s. We even had an American civil rights leader use an anti-Semitic slur to describe the residents of New York City. Run, Jesse, run. Of course, we African Americans never held him accountable because we are only concerned about white folks calling us names. It's okay for our leaders to be moral hypocrites. You know, and this is something that it really bothers me. It really bothers me, this anti-Semitism. How quickly many of us have forgotten that at the dawning of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, that a lot of the people who were walking hand in hand with Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders were Jewish. A lot of contributions, a lot of money that came in to support the efforts of Martin Luther King and other civil rights activists came from Jewish organizations. We've forgotten that. Have we forgotten about the 3 individuals who were slain in Philadelphia, Mississippi, attempting to register voters? It's your history, folks. But we conveniently forget about people. We conveniently forget about people. Sad. On Sunday, preacher at my church, associate preacher, accused Israel of being engaged in genocide, accused Israel of being engaged in genocide. Now, that same preacher chased out every white person who had been a member of my church, chased them all out. And very soon, will probably be writing a letter, either a formal chastising of that statement, or I may even leave that church myself. As I get older, I have a tremendous intolerance of racism and anti-Semitism, particularly when it comes from the pulpit. The author and founder of my faith wasn't a racist, nor did he have any racist policy. But he himself was a victim of racism, and still a racism to this day, because most of the people who say that he is the founder and author of their faith refuse to call him by his actual name, but will call him by a made-up name, and that made-up name originated from anti-Semitism. Yeah, believe it. But as Bill Withers once sang, you're like a man loving Jesus, but says he can't stand a Jew. We cannot follow moral hypocrites. We cannot follow moral hypocrites. We can only pray for them. Now we're moving rapidly towards the end of this program. Man, y'all guys, let me talk all this time. Um, Let me announce that for our next installment of Issues and Answers, which will come on November 27th, we're going to have another conversation about Stone Mountain of Georgia. Now, it was about 3, maybe 4 months ago when I wanted to discuss this topic before as a result of a program I watched on the PBS. I attempted to contact a politician who's sponsoring a bill concerning Stone Mountain. I attempted to contact several people who were on that program, and everyone that I could contact had an excuse. And the politician I spoke of, even when I was given his phone number by someone who stated that they were close to him, he didn't respond ever, ever. So my guest next week, and I'm going to announce that on social media in the next week or so, will be here. And we're going to have another view of the Stone Mountain controversy. And I think it's something that is important, relevant, um, because here on Issues and Answers, during my time here, I have tried to give voice to those who are ignored or marginalized by popular media. And before we close out, let me just wish all of you, a very happy Thanksgiving. And remember, it's more blessed to give than to receive as you gorge yourself on a sumptuous meal. There are lots of veterans, lots of homeless people, and lots of your neighbors who really, really need uh, some of your time, maybe some of your financial help. So let's not forget that. Meanwhile, folks, thank you for listening to Issues and Answers on WCEG. I have been Norman A. Carter Jr., giving you my views on a lot of topics today. Just ask that you stay tuned, stay blessed, treat yourself well. Good day.